signing on to this training. We wanted to carve out some time just to start a discussion on HUD's new equal access and gender identity rule that was recently rolled out. So HUD came out with this new rule in September, and then they officially rolled it out in October of 2016. So our goal today is to just give a broad overview of the rule and discuss ways that we can ensure that all of our programs are fostering an environment that's welcoming to all participants. We hope to also successfully incorporate the new rule into all of our monitoring, COC, ESG, and just ensure that each continuum has a policy that reflects this rule as well. We've already begun doing that in some communities. We've started rolling out this language within written standards, and in communities that it hasn't been done, we're working on doing that. In some communities, we've even gone so far as writing in gender identity into rank and review when we look at cultural barriers. So we have been looking at this past year. And additionally, we've also started implementing this within certain monitoring tools, and the goal is to have it within all of our communities' monitoring tools by the end of the year. So I'm going to ask everyone if they have comments or questions or concerns to just save them till the end. And also, I'm going to ask you to have your volume up on the computer because we're going to start out with a short video clip. But right before we start, I just want to give a shout out to Abby Miller, who is not on this call, but she did send me her resources for this presentation. And for those who don't know who Abby Miller is, she's with HUD, and she played a really big part in creating this equal access and gender identity rule. So she helped me a lot with this presentation. So make sure your volume's up because we're going to go straight into a clip.
Mary Costello.
Is George Montclair, and 6 I would describe myself as majestic, fabulous, and sparkly.
Children are interested and what methods are. George has a lot of energy and a lot of passion about the things that he likes. I first discovered that George was transgender and no character adjustments. That's normal.
But I think oh, for transit and gender very masculine, because I think it was eight. But I don't really fit into any role that someone would usually do.
George has the transgender family, and I was curious, and so I asked him, hey, do you ever miss being birthday? And George said, no, I don't, Mom. And then paused for a second, and I said, do you ever miss having a daughter? And I said, no, I don't. You're right here. Oh, you are right here in front of me. I don't care whether I call you daughter or son or anything between. I'm telling you, it's the opinion of always emotion. You're just a happier version. They call it the same school from kindergarten until he transitioned. So I want to know what he has his birthday. He decided his fifth grade holiday was going to transition to school. And he marched into the classroom and he said, you all know hands and hands birthday. Put in my head, in my heart, and boy, and I appreciate the people on board and more. And that's it. The kids were great. But that's the thing, the kids are great. Somebody else that seems to have more discomfort about people with transgender, people are different in general. Children, they die down. There's so many different versions of being with themselves out there. And I don't know about it.
Hold on. So I'm going to give everyone a minute to wipe their eyes, because that video clip always gets me. And if you want to check out that video clip, and there's a ton more, the resource we used for that was the Transgender Law Center. So there's a lot of really great resources on that website. The reason I liked to start with that video clip is because while we're here to talk about a regulation or a rule that's put out by HUD, I think it's really important to note that we're not just here to check the box for complying with the regulation. It's important to note that these are our people, and these are the people that we're serving. And we're not just here to help those that we expect or think will show up at our door. We're here to help everyone who shows up at our door, including people like George, even though they're not like the people we expect. And this really reflects our system and how we've become really client-centered. We see that through the implementation of Housing First, where we meet people where they're at, as well as through the coordinated entry system, which is very client-centered and meeting people where they're at. Transgender folks are twice as likely to become homeless, which speaks to exactly how important this rule is. It's been found that transgenders are turned away much of the time, and if not turned away, they're placed inappropriately. So when they're entered into a program or a project, even if they're in there appropriately, they experience harassment, they experience assault, and about 25% of transgenders are reporting that they're being assaulted at a shelter, whether it's by program staff or residents.
What was that figure again?
25% are reported being harassed or assaulted. So why do we even need these rules? And I think it's clear just from that statistic alone, but among LGBT youth up to the age of 24, the average age of being homeless the first time is 15 years old. 2/3 of homeless shelters failed to enroll a person that identified as a transgender. 2/3, which is an incredibly high number. Nearly a quarter of homeless transgender residents report being assaulted by other residents. Again, the study shows at 25%. So just to take it back, 4 years ago, HUD had published the original Equal Access Rule back in 2012, and it pretty simply states that equal access must be given in all HUD projects. And this is regardless of sexual orientation, marital status, or gender identity. This past October 2016, HUD came out with a more fleshed out rule that now says projects must place and serve people according to their gender identity. It is not permissible to question a person when they come through your doors about their anatomy, their medical history, or identification documents. These people that are showing up at our doors are already in a very vulnerable state, and to question them about anatomy or medical history can be extremely demeaning. So I just wanted to give you the background on the rule, where it came from, and why HUD felt that they needed it a little bit more fleshed out. So I just want to go through the terms that you might be hearing, and just so we're all clear and on the same page with all of them. Transgender is an umbrella term. And what happens is sometimes what we see is that people come into a project, they transition, and then they no longer identify themselves as transgender, but a transgender person is one who does not identify with the sex that they were born with. Transitioning is different because that's the actual process but transitioning doesn't require medical treatment. So we should never be asking medical history, just to go back to that. Gender identity is how a person identifies with themselves and how they feel. It is not the gender that they were assigned at sex. Gender expression is how people express their gender identity. So it could be the way they dress, the way they act, their hairstyle, the language, their body language. And then separate and aside from that is sexual orientation, which is separate from gender expression and separate from gender identity, and it has nothing to do with gender identity. It's who you're attracted to. So this new gender identity rule and equal opportunity rule, who does it apply to? If you receive any funding from any of the streams that you see up on your screen, it applies to you. It doesn't matter if you're getting $1 from HUD. It doesn't matter if you're getting $1 million from HUD. You need to be compliant with the Equal Access and Gender Identity Rule. The one caveat that I'll give you is that it needs to be current funding. So for example, if you've received CDBG money maybe 20 years ago and you used it for your brick and mortar, this may not apply to you since it's not current funding. And even if you're not HUD funded, the Fair Housing Act applies to all dwellings. And the Fair Housing Act is a congressional statute. It's a congressional law that authorizes all federal agencies that deal with housing to implement that act. And under the Fair Housing, gender identity and sexual orientation are both covered as sex discrimination. So I just want to walk you through the next 3 slides just to show you examples of what discrimination might look like. So examples of LGBT discrimination under the Fair Housing Act. A real estate agent doesn't want to show a lesbian couple an apartment because she's uncomfortable with the thought of 2 women sharing a single bedroom. That is not permissible. Or a landlord refusing to rent to a transgender man because of his perceived identity. Not permissible. The next 3, again, these are all discrimination, not allowing someone to have a mortgage loan because someone's bisexual, because she dresses in a way that doesn't conform. Maybe she's a little too masculine. Again, harassing someone because they're a little bit more feminine. These are all people that are showing up for our help that we should not be turning away or discriminating because they don't fit into what we think they should fit into. You work at a shelter, someone calls you for help, they tell you they're transgender, and you say, "I'm sorry, I can't help you," and you hang up on them. That's discrimination. We should not be turning anybody away. A shelter employee making references to genitalia or to surgery, not permissible. And a shelter employee refusing to enroll a participant because they're afraid somebody else might be unsafe or uncomfortable, again, is not their call. We should be responding to needs and not preempting what we think they're going to be. And again, there's more examples just for you to look at. Failing to address complaints because it's from an LGBT individual, or revealing a status that somebody is transgender, and excluding people based on family composition. I want to go back to that second bullet that you're looking at, requiring special procedures, and just touch upon that. You should have accommodations and procedures in place if somebody that is transgender shows up at your door. However, You should not be pushing and requiring these accommodations on anybody. They should be available if the person requests them. And even if you don't have special accommodations, and I'm going to use the example of a men's shelter. Say this men's shelter has shared sleeping arrangements, so there is no private room. You should still continue to serve trans folks. If they come to your door and they say they identify as male, then they are eligible to stay in that shelter, even if there's not a special room, if they choose to be there and accept your services. Again, we're going to keep going back to being client-centered. A project can offer these accommodations, but they absolutely cannot require them. You can't segregate people because of their transgender status. Again, we're responding to people's needs, and we're not preempting them. So now I just want to briefly touch on that third bullet on the other side, family composition. It's simple. If you're serving families, you're serving all families. Any composition of people who show up at your door as a family, whether that's a man with children, a woman with children, same-sex couples with children, or even people who are not blood related or related via marital status, if they identify as a family, you're accepting that family. So before I move on, because I do want to talk about next steps, I want to clarify, because I've been talking about gender identity and how people identify, and it's been very heavy on trans folks, whether they identify with how they were born. I also want to point out that there are people who consider themselves binary, and they don't identify. There is also an option in HMIS, so we should still be serving these people and not turning them away. There's the option to check off that this person does not identify as male, female, or transgender. So we shouldn't be turning anybody away, and I just wanted to throw that in there because I know I didn't have any of that within the presentation. So for next steps, programs, frontline staff, you should be identifying whether or not you even have an anti-discrimination policy at this point. And if you do, is it publicly posted? I did include a link to the HUD Exchange where you can go on and get more information that can help you in creating this policy. But it's really important that if you don't, that is a good starting place. You should have a policy that says we place, serve, and accommodate people in accordance with their gender identity. And we don't require them to show evidence of their gender identity. It's as simple as that. You need to have a policy. For EDs and managers and program directors, you have to make sure you're training your staff on how to implement that policy. And then for full continuums, do we have policies in place? And again, I'm going to go back. We've started incorporating them into the written standards. We've started incorporating this into monitoring procedures. So the COCs are getting on board with this year, and we're going to keep going with it and keep monitoring to ensure. And our goal is to have biannual trainings on the gender identity rule. So our next training will be in March, and we're gonna keep going with that. I do want to open it up because I feel like we have time, and I want to ask if there's anyone on the line who has implemented this new gender identity rule, and if you've come across any barriers with it and how you reacted to those barriers. No one. Well, let me ask, I just want to get a feel for who is on the line. Is there anyone who does have a policy that reflects this new gender identity rule?
This is Chemung County. I'm not sure, but we're revving up with a cultural competency committee and health literacy committee, and we'll be developing one if we don't have one, because we're not sure exactly what we have with the Rochester Diocese.
That's great, Linda. Yeah. And I believe Myra may have it in their written standards as well. So the Continuum for New York 501 has it in their written standards. So now we just have to work on creating those policies for each of the programs, and creating a committee for cultural competency is a really good place to start.
Jen, this is Wendy from Legal Aid. We have a general non-discrimination policy that covers it, but as you're talking, it seems to me like we have not nailed down that family composition as well as we should. And I'm a little, and I guess this is just a moment of a question, in terms of the example you gave of somebody who presented a male-only shelter and it's a group sleeping accommodation. If the person does not identify as transgender, you just plow ahead, even though you may have suspicion that they are, because it would be wrong to inquire further based on your guess.
Absolutely. You're 100% correct, Wendy. It's up to them to decide if they want to disclose that information to program staff. Otherwise, if they come into the program and say they're male, you treat them the same way you would treat any other participant in that shelter. Were there any other questions?
Hi, Jen. This is Kristen from Interfaith.
Hey, Kristen.
Hi. I have about a million questions. So, the Transgender Law Center, that sounds like it may be a great resource for us. We serve, well, we have a lot of different programs, but, you know, in our shelters we're serving men and women, and we have dormitory style settings. So we have a lot of questions, and we want to make sure that we're doing things right. So would you recommend that we reach out to the Transgender Law Center for some guidance if we have questions? Is that a good resource?
I think they're a great resource, and I was directed there by HUD as well to use them as a resource. I think if you have specific questions, why don't you shoot me some questions, because we can work with HUD to answer those. We'll probably get you more concrete answers for you. Because again, this area is so new to all of us that we're all really learning together at this point how to act in these circumstances and how to treat all of these participants so that we're not discriminating. So it is brand new territory for a lot of us.
Right, and you know, we might think that we're doing things right, and then now I'm questioning everything. So I will reach out to you and
definitely.
Yeah, and this is that exchange has a section of LGBT resources also.
I believe they do, yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. If there are no other questions, we will also be posting this webinar. It's been recorded, and there will be a link on the CARES website, so you can always go back and re-listen if you want to hear me over and over.
I think this is great that you're doing this.
Thank you.
Not just because it's a requirement, it's needed. Are you able to send us the slides from this as well?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, that would be great.
I'll put those on the website. Perfect. Yeah, we're going to post those on the website as well. Great. If there are no other questions, then we'll direct you to the website for the recording and the slides. And we will keep up with these trainings, and if you have any specific project questions, definitely send me an email.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.